My daughter sent me a message. Come to my wedding without your new girlfriend. She'll be in the way. My son added, don't try to replace mom. I replied, fine, then you'll never see my money again. 2 days before her wedding, I made my decision. Would it destroy our family or finally make them respect me? Before we continue, please subscribe to the channel and let us know where you are listening in the comments. My reading glasses slipped down my nose as the number at the bottom of the page hit me like a sledgehammer. $35,000. The red ink seemed to pulse on the expensive cardstock, mocking my modest kitchen with its oak cabinets from 1987 and linoleum that had seen better decades. The front door slammed open without warning. Stella stormed in carrying an armload of bridal magazines, fabric swatches cascading from her designer purse like confetti from someone else's celebration. Dad, I need you to look at these final numbers right now. Her heels clicked against my floor with military precision. The venue coordinator says we have to confirm by Monday or we lose the spring garden package. I set the estimate down carefully, my arthritis-stiff fingers trembling slightly. Stella, honey, this says $35,000. That's more than half my annual pension. She dropped the magazines on my table, scattering the bills I'd been organizing. Wedding cake photos mixed with my electric bill. 150 guests is normal, Dad. Sarah Mitchell had 200 at her wedding last year. Sarah Mitchell's father owns 3 car dealerships. Well, maybe that's the problem. Her voice sharpened like a blade finding its mark. Maybe you should have aimed higher than fixing transmissions for 40 years. The words stung, but I kept my voice level. I've saved $18,000 for your wedding. That's a good start for a young couple building a life together. Stella laughed, but there was no humor in it. $18,000? Dad, that barely covers the flowers and photography. Silas's parents are contributing $25,000, and they think that's being conservative. She began pacing my small kitchen, her movements sharp and agitated. I gripped the table edge, feeling the familiar ache in my lower back from 30 years of bending over car engines. Listen, sweetheart, maybe we can scale back a little. A smaller venue, fewer guests. Scale back? Her eyes flashed. This is my wedding, Dad, the most important day of my life, and you want me to have it in some community center because you can't provide? The accusation hit deeper than I expected. I've provided for this family my whole life, paid for your college, your car, helped with your apartment deposit when you moved out. That's what fathers do. She turned on me, her face flushed with anger and something else I couldn't identify. Normal fathers figure out how to make their daughters' dreams come true. I fumbled with the papers, trying to find words that wouldn't sound like excuses. Your mother and I got married for $800. We were happy. Yeah, well, look how that turned out. The silence stretched between us like a chasm. I could hear the kitchen clock ticking, marking seconds that felt like hours. Then she delivered the blow I never saw coming. You know what? It's good Mom left you and found a real man who can provide. At least Richard doesn't make her feel guilty for wanting nice things. The pain hit my chest like a physical blow. My vision blurred around the edges, and I gripped the chair back to steady myself. The color drained from Stella's face as she realized what she'd just said, but her jaw remained set in defiant angles. Stella, I can't do this anymore. She swept the wedding materials off the table, sending estimates and fabric samples floating to the floor like autumn leaves. Maybe Jasper was right. Maybe you really don't care about us anymore. The door slammed hard enough to rattle the dishes in my cabinets. Through the window, I watched her silver BMW reverse out of my driveway with the aggressive speed of someone running from their own words. I stood alone in my kitchen, surrounded by scattered dreams and broken promises, the sound of her departure still echoing through rooms that suddenly felt far too quiet. I was still gathering wedding papers from the linoleum when heavy footsteps crossed my front porch. The door opened without a knock, a liberty that still caught me off guard, even after 2 years of Silas treating my home like his personal property. Mr. Jenkins? His voice carried that practiced sympathy I'd learned to distrust. I came to smooth things over. I straightened slowly, crumpled estimates still clutched in my arthritic hands. Silas filled my doorway in his expensive suit, surveying the mess with calculating eyes that took in everything and revealed nothing. Coffee? The offer came automatically, a reflex from decades of hosting unexpected visitors. My hands still trembled as I reached for mugs. That would be nice. He settled into my kitchen chair without invitation, his presence transforming my modest space into something that felt smaller, more cramped. Stella called me. She's pretty upset. I poured coffee with measured movements, buying time while my heart still hammered from the earlier confrontation. She has expensive dreams worth making happen. Silas accepted the mug but didn't drink. A father should want to give his daughter the wedding she deserves. The judgment in his tone made me step back instinctively. I'd heard that particular inflection before, in Minnie's voice during those final months before she left. I've offered what I can afford. Afford? He leaned forward, his expression shifting from false sympathy to something harder. Mr. Jenkins, we're talking about your daughter's happiness. Surely that's worth more than watching numbers in a bank account. I gripped the counter behind me, feeling the familiar pressure building in my chest. I'm not a wealthy man, Silas. I worked honest jobs, saved what I could. And that's admirable. His smile never reached his eyes. But sometimes a real father finds a way to reach beyond his limitations. My father mortgaged our house twice to give my sister the wedding she wanted. The comparison stung because I knew it was designed to. Silas had perfected the art of making his generosity sound like basic human decency, while making my caution seem like failure. Other fathers have made sacrifices, he continued, standing now to tower over my hunched frame. Taken second jobs, borrowed against retirement, asked family for help. A daughter only gets married once. Some daughters get married multiple times. The words slipped out before I could stop them. His expression darkened. That's a cruel thing to say about Stella. I wasn't talking about, it's heartbreaking to see a daughter disappointed by her own father. He moved toward the door, his mission accomplished. Stella deserves better than feeling like a burden on the man who should be her biggest supporter. The kitchen felt arctic after he left. I stood alone again, twice attacked in the span of an hour, questioning everything I thought I knew about being a good father. My coffee had grown cold in the mug, but my hands shook too much to drink it anyway. Through the window, I watched his BMW follow the same path Stella's had taken, leaving me with the uncomfortable certainty that this conversation had been planned long before my daughter's tearful phone call. I moved from the kitchen to my living room, with the slow deliberation of someone carrying invisible weight. The old armchair welcomed me like an understanding friend, its worn leather molded to accommodate 30 years of evening reading and weekend naps. The family photos on my side table caught the afternoon light streaming through gauze curtains. My eyes settled on the largest frame, Minnie and me on our wedding day, both of us impossibly young and radiating the kind of happiness that believes it will last forever. I picked up the frame with reverent hands, studying faces that belonged to people I barely recognized anymore. We'd been so certain then, so confident in our ability to weather any storm together. 8 years ago, everything shattered on a Tuesday afternoon, when I came home early from the shop with the flu, found Richard's car in my driveway, heard voices from our bedroom that destroyed 30 years of trust in 30 seconds. The betrayal cut deeper than discovering the affair itself. Minnie had been planning her exit for months while I remained obliviously content with our routine. The children chose sides with surgical precision. Stella immediately defended her mother's right to happiness, while Jasper simply became too busy with his programming career to return my calls. Neither bothered to ask how I was managing the wreckage of my life. I'd expected family solidarity during those dark months. Instead, I found myself eating dinner alone, talking to empty rooms, learning that loneliness has its own particular sound, the echo of footsteps in a house built for two. Work became my refuge. I'd arrive at the garage before dawn and stay until closing, losing myself in the honest problems of broken transmissions and failing alternators. Engines made sense. People, apparently, did not. 3 years ago, I met Faye at the library's senior reading group. She'd been widowed for 5 years and understood the peculiar grief of outliving a marriage, whether through death or deliberation. Her patience amazed me, the way she waited for me to remember how to laugh, how to trust that someone might genuinely enjoy my company. But my children treated Faye like an intruder at a crime scene. When I introduced her at Stella's birthday dinner, the conversation became stilted and artificial. Jasper addressed her with polite distance, as if she were a temporary inconvenience rather than the woman who'd helped me rediscover joy. They continued their financial requests throughout my grief and recovery, Stella needing help with her car payment, Jasper requiring funds for his new computer setup. I provided because that's what fathers do, expecting nothing in return except the basic respect children owe their parents. But respect, apparently, was not included in the transaction. I set the wedding photo back on the table and stood with careful movements, my back protesting the emotional weight I'd been carrying. Outside, my garden waited with the patient reliability of living things that depend on consistent care rather than conditional love. The back door opened onto my sanctuary, neat rows of tomatoes and peppers, herb beds bordered with stones I'd collected from Lake Erie over the years. Here, at least, my efforts produced predictable results. Standing among plants I'd nurtured from seeds, clarity began replacing confusion. The patterns were obvious once I stopped making excuses for them. Years of one-sided generosity, accumulating disrespect disguised as family loyalty. Emotional manipulation masked as love. The afternoon sun warmed my shoulders as understanding crystallized into something harder, more purposeful. I had choices to make, and for the first time in years, I intended to make them based on my own interests rather than other people's expectations. My tomato plants accepted my attention with the silent gratitude that humans rarely offered. I moved between the rows with automatic precision, checking for hornworms and adjusting stakes, letting the afternoon sun work its therapy on my shoulders and neck. The phone buzzed against my thigh, a banking notification I'd normally ignore until evening. But something about the day's emotional carnage made me pull it out with dirt-stained fingers, squinting at the bright screen in the garden light. Monthly statement summary. Recent transactions highlighted in clinical blue digits. Stella Jenkins, car payment assist. $450 Jasper Jenkins. Emergency fund, transfer $600 Stella Jenkins. Wedding preliminary, $1,200. I scrolled backward through the months, my thumb leaving small smudges on the glass. The pattern emerged like a rash spreading across my financial life. Consistent bleeding transfers that I'd authorized without truly calculating their cumulative weight. 3 years of supporting adult children who'd never asked how I was managing. College loan assistance for Stella, $300 monthly. Mortgage help for Jasper when his programming contract ended, $600 monthly for 8 months. The emergency surgeries, car repairs, apartment deposits, computer equipment, all necessary at the time, all reasonable individual requests. The mathematics hit me like a physical blow, $75,000, more than double what I'd saved for my own retirement emergencies, more than Faye and I spent on ourselves in an entire year. I crushed a ripe tomato in my grip, red juice seeping between my fingers like accusation. Where had Minnie been during Jasper's appendectomy crisis 2 years ago? Vacationing in Barbados with Richard while I emptied my savings account to cover his surgery deductible. That's what fathers do, I'd told myself then, echoing words that now tasted bitter as copper pennies. But mothers apparently had different obligations. The phone felt heavy in my cleaned hand as I scrolled through 3 years of financial bleeding. No corresponding deposits from their mother, who sent birthday cards from luxury resorts while I rationed my grocery budget to afford their continued emergencies. I'd become their personal bank, reliable, accessible, never questioning the interest rate on emotional debt that compounded daily, but never seemed to reach principal. Standing among plants that thrived because I'd given them exactly what they needed, I understood finally that my children had learned to take without giving, consume without contributing, demand without gratitude because I'd trained them to expect unconditional financial availability. The realization should have brought anger, but instead delivered a strange calm. Numbers didn't lie the way people did. Bank statements recorded truth more accurately than family promises. I walked toward the house with the phone still glowing in my palm, its screen displaying 3 years of documented evidence that love, to my children, had always been measured in dollars rather than devotion. The garden bench welcomed my weight as I rehearsed conversations in my head, each version more diplomatic than my actual feelings warranted. 30 minutes had passed since my financial awakening. 30 minutes of internal debate between my wounded pride and my persistent hope for family reconciliation. I dialed Stella's number with deliberate movements, each digit pressed like a small prayer that this could somehow end differently than it began. "Dad?" Her voice carried immediate wariness, as if she expected another lecture about fiscal responsibility. "Stella, honey, I've been thinking about our conversation earlier." I kept my tone measured, searching for the right balance between firmness and affection. What if we found a middle ground? Silence stretched across the connection before she responded. What kind of middle ground? 25,000 instead of 35, 100 guests instead of 150. We could make some adjustments without sacrificing the important elements. But Dad, my friends will notice if I have to cut people from the list. The people who truly matter will be there. Sometimes smaller celebrations feel more intimate, more meaningful. I pressed forward despite her skeptical silence. Quality over quantity, right? Focus on the love, not the spectacle. Her voice shifted, calculation replacing resistance. I suppose, if I had to choose between having everyone there or having no wedding at all. Exactly. We'll make it beautiful within our means. You're creative. You can make a 100-person celebration feel like the event of the century. The enthusiasm that crept into her voice sounded genuine enough to kindle hope in my chest. Actually, yes, I could make the most elegant guest list, prioritize the people who really count. Maybe it would feel more exclusive, more special. That's my girl, smart and practical. I'll work on the revisions tonight and tomorrow. I'll send you the final list Monday morning, I promise. Everything will be perfect, Dad. I know it will, sweetheart. You always make beautiful things happen. You're the best dad ever. This is going to be amazing. You'll see. Thank you for being so understanding about everything. The call ended with warmth that felt foreign after the day's earlier confrontations. I sat in the garden's golden light, believing I'd navigated successfully between financial reality and paternal duty, restored peace to a family that had been fracturing since breakfast. Sunday passed quietly. Faye and I attended church, worked together in the garden, shared meals seasoned with contentment rather than conflict. I felt proud of my diplomatic skills, satisfied that compromise had prevented permanent damage to relationships I'd spent 32 years building. Monday morning arrived with coffee steam and newspaper comfort, the domestic routine of a man who believed his family crisis had been resolved through reasonable conversation and mutual respect. 2 days later, everything changed. Monday morning unfolded with the predictable comfort of routine, fresh coffee aroma filling my kitchen, newspaper folded beside my favorite mug, Faye's breakfast dishes already washed and gleaming in the dish rack. I sat in the peaceful aftermath of what I believed was successful crisis management. The phone chirped its cheerful notification sound as I reached for the sports section. Family group chat message from Stella. Updated wedding guest list with a small heart emoji. I smiled as I opened the message, expecting confirmation of our Saturday compromise. Maybe a thank you note for my flexibility. Instead, the words on the screen hit like ice water thrown in my face. Hi everyone. Final guest list ready. Dad, come without your new girlfriend. She'll be awkward there. The coffee mug trembled in my grip as I read the message again, hoping I'd misunderstood something. The casual cruelty of it, wrapped in pink hearts and emoji kisses, made my chest tighten with a pain sharper than anything I'd felt during Saturday's confrontations. My new girlfriend. 3 years of marriage reduced to a casual relationship. 3 years of Faye's patience, kindness, and love, dismissed as if she were some temporary companion I'd picked up at a shopping mall. The mug slipped from my fingers, ceramic exploding against the kitchen floor in a spray of brown liquid and sharp fragments. I stared at the phone screen through vision that blurred with involuntary tears, rereading words that carved deeper with each repetition. She'd taken my money and still excluded my wife. The manipulation was surgical in its precision, accepting my compromise while maintaining absolute control over the guest list, getting financial support while ensuring Faye knew exactly where she stood in the family hierarchy. My hands gripped the table edge until my knuckles turned white, seeking physical stability while my emotional world tilted off its axis. Heart palpitations hammered against my ribs like fists demanding justice. Saturday's promises about understanding and compromise hadn't lasted 48 hours. The sweet gratitude, the enthusiastic planning, the assurances that everything would be perfect, all lies crafted to extract my money while preserving her right to humiliate my wife. I thought of Faye upstairs, probably reading her morning devotional, unaware that her stepdaughter had just publicly relegated her to the status of unwelcome intruder. 3 years of trying to build bridges, of accepting rejection with grace, of loving me despite my complicated family, and this was her reward. The shock transformed into something harder, colder than Saturday's heated anger. This wasn't emotional explosion. This was calculated cruelty that demanded calculated response. I sat in the wreckage of my morning routine, coffee seeping across linoleum around broken ceramic, my phone still glowing with evidence of my daughter's true character. The device felt warm in my palm, my finger hovering over the reply button. For the first time in 65 years, I understood what real betrayal felt like. I stared at the phone screen until the words blurred, hoping somehow I'd misread Stella's casual cruelty. Come without your new girlfriend. She'll be awkward there. 3 years of marriage reduced to a temporary inconvenience, wrapped in pink hearts like poison in candy coating. The notification chimed again before I could process the full impact of her dismissal. Another message in the family chat, this one from Jasper, my son who called twice a year and never on holidays. I support my sister. Don't try to replace mom. The phone trembled in my grip as understanding crashed over me like ice water. This wasn't Stella's impulsive cruelty. This was coordinated warfare. They'd planned this together, probably discussed it during one of their private conversations that never included their father. Replace mom. As if loving Faye somehow erased 30 years of marriage to a woman who'd betrayed me with my neighbor. As if seeking happiness after devastation was somehow disloyal to the person who'd shattered my ability to trust. I stood abruptly, the kitchen chair scraping against linoleum with a sound like fingernails on concrete. The room suddenly felt suffocating, too small to contain the rage building in my chest, like pressure in a boiler approaching critical mass. Both of them. Not just Stella's selfishness, but Jasper's calculated support of her position. The boy I'd taught to change oil and tie fishing knots, who'd cried in my arms when his mother left, now standing with his sister against the man who'd sacrificed his retirement fund to keep them afloat. My face burned with humiliation and fury. They communicated behind my back, presented united fronts against my decisions, treated my wife like an intruder in a family that had expelled me years ago when I refused to finance their mother's guilt money. The phone screen cracked under the pressure of my grip, a spider web of damage spreading across their smiling faces in the family photo header. Appropriate symbolism for relationships that had been fractured long before today's final blow. I thought of Faye upstairs, probably organizing her book club materials, unaware that my children had just publicly branded her as unwelcome at family events. 3 years of patient attempts to win their approval, dismissed with emoji hearts and passive-aggressive manipulation. They wanted my money, but not my happiness. My financial support, but not my emotional independence. My continued servitude to their needs while denying my right to build a life beyond their convenience. The broken coffee mug on the floor reflected light from the window. Shards of ceramic that would never reassemble into something whole again, like trust, like respect, like the illusion that family meant more than financial transactions. I walked toward the living room with deliberate steps, my phone clutched in a grip that could have crushed coal into diamonds. The rage was transforming into something colder, more dangerous, the quiet fury of a man who'd finally understood exactly where he stood in his children's hierarchy of priorities. The living room welcomed me with afternoon sunlight streaming across my computer desk, the command center where I'd managed every financial decision for the past 3 years. I settled into the familiar chair where I paid bills, balanced budgets, and apparently enabled my children's systematic disrespect. My fingers moved across the keyboard with mechanical precision, opening the banking software that held the architecture of my financial relationships. The screen populated with neat columns of monthly transfers, automatic payments that had become as routine as breathing. Stella Jenkins, car payment assist, $450 monthly. Stella Jenkins, insurance coverage, $300 monthly. Stella Jenkins, phone, utilities, $450 monthly. Jasper Jenkins, mortgage support, $600 monthly. Jasper Jenkins, emergency fund, $200 monthly. Numbers that had seemed reasonable when considered individually now formed a pattern of dependency I'd been too generous to recognize. $75,000 over 3 years, money that could have secured Faye's retirement, funded our own dreams, purchased the respect I'd been giving away for free. I opened a spreadsheet and began calculating with the cold precision of an accountant auditing a failed business. Stella's wedding was impossible without my $25,000. Jasper's mortgage would default within 3 months without my monthly assistance. Their mother contributed exactly $0 to their financial stability while living in luxury with her new husband. They'd made me their personal Federal Reserve, reliable, predictable, never questioning the interest rates on emotional loans that somehow never reach maturity. The mouse cursor hovered over the automatic transfer settings, like a weapon waiting for orders. 3 clicks would cancel Stella's support. 2 more would eliminate Jasper's safety net. 5 simple mouse clicks to transform their world from comfortable entitlement to uncomfortable reality. I thought of their inevitable panic calls, the tears and bargaining that would follow. Stella's wedding plans collapsing like houses built on sand. Jasper's mortgage company sending foreclosure notices. They're scrambling to contact the mother who'd been absent from their financial crises for 8 years. Justice felt remarkably straightforward when reduced to banking transactions. For 37 years, I'd defined good fatherhood as unconditional financial availability. Pay for college, cover emergencies, subsidize dreams, absorb insults with grateful silence. But good children, apparently, meant something different to my offspring. Continued extraction of resources while maintaining the right to exclude my wife from family celebrations. The family chat remained open on my phone, their messages glowing like accusations in the afternoon light. 2 adults who'd learned to weaponize gratitude, who understood that saying, "Thank you, Dad," purchased the right to unlimited withdrawals from my emotional bank account. I drafted a response in the text field, deleted it, tried again. The words needed precision, cutting enough to communicate finality, dignified enough to preserve what remained of my self-respect. My fingers found the keyboard one final time, composing the message that would either restore balance to our relationship or permanently dissolve the illusion that family meant more than financial convenience. The cursor blinked in the empty text field, waiting for words that would change everything. I returned to the kitchen with my phone gripped like evidence in a trial I was about to win. The spilled coffee had dried into brown stains across the table surface, and ceramic fragments still scattered the floor, physical reminders of the morning's emotional devastation that now felt like ancient history. 11:45. Faye would return from her library volunteer shift at 2 o'clock, giving me just enough time to execute my decision and prepare for the inevitable aftermath. The broken mug crunched under my shoe as I positioned myself at the table where their betrayal had been delivered. I opened the family chat and stared at their messages until my vision cleared of rage and focused on strategy. The response needed to communicate finality without explanation, dignity without apology. They'd chosen to treat me like a convenient funding source. I'd respond with the businesslike efficiency they deserved. First draft: after 37 years of supporting this family, I'm disappointed by your disrespect toward my wife and your assumption that my money comes without conditions. Too explanatory, too much justification for a decision that needed no defense. Second draft: since you've made your feelings about Faye clear, I'm withdrawing my financial support effective immediately. Good luck with your wedding and mortgage payments. Too harsh, too much potential for immediate retaliation visits. Third draft achieved the perfect balance between finality and restraint. Fine, then you'll never see my money again either. My thumb hovered over the send button while my heart hammered against my ribs like a prisoner demanding freedom. This single tap would transform me from victim to victor, from enabler to enforcer of boundaries that should have been established years ago. 3 years of watching them treat Faye like an unwelcome stranger. 8 years of financial support without emotional reciprocation. 37 years of believing that good fathers absorb disrespect in exchange for their children's happiness. I pressed send. The message appeared in the chat with the definitive finality of a courtroom gavel. No taking it back now. No softening the blow with explanations or negotiations. Just 9 words that transferred power from their hands back into mine. I turned off the phone immediately and slid it into the kitchen drawer beside the takeout menus, out of sight, beyond the temptation of immediate responses. The silence that followed felt both terrifying and liberating, like stepping off a cliff and discovering wings. The cleaning began automatically, sweeping ceramic fragments into the dustpan, wiping coffee stains from the table, restoring order to the space where my family had finally revealed their true priorities. Physical tasks that grounded me while my emotional world shifted on its axis. By noon, the kitchen showed no evidence of the morning's trauma. Clean surfaces, organized spaces, everything returned to the peaceful domesticity that Faye would expect when she arrived home. But I felt fundamentally changed, as if the man who'd received those messages no longer existed. Somewhere across town, my children were discovering that their personal bank had just declared bankruptcy. The Honda's door slammed in my driveway at exactly 3:30, 4 hours after I'd sent my ultimatum into the digital void. I'd been expecting this visit since noon, had spent the afternoon organizing bank statements and practicing the conversation in my head until every word felt like armor. Rapid footsteps hammered across my walkway. Not the confident click of Stella's usual arrival, but the desperate scramble of someone whose world had just shifted beneath her feet. The knocking came in aggressive bursts, impatient and demanding, as if urgency could somehow reverse the morning's consequences. I opened the door to find my daughter transformed. Makeup streaked down her cheeks in dark rivulets. Designer blouse wrinkled from what had clearly been hours of panic. Her usually perfect hair hanging in defeated strands around her face. "Dad, why aren't you answering your phone?" The accusation hit me before she'd fully crossed the threshold, pushing past me into the foyer with the entitled assumption that my home remained her safe harbor regardless of her behavior. I watched her pace my entryway like a caged animal, gesturing frantically as she launched into damage control mode. "I've been calling for hours. I was just trying to keep the guest list small, you know? Management-sized, intimate." The word choice fascinated me. Management-sized, as if my wife were a business expense to be optimized rather than a human being deserving respect. I remained silent, letting her exhaust the first wave of justifications while studying this version of my daughter I'd never seen before. "Faye isn't really close family yet, you understand?" She turned to face me, her eyes searching for agreement that would never come. "I mean, it's awkward having people there who don't really know everyone, right? Social dynamics and all that. Close family yet. 3 years of marriage reduced to a probationary period subject to my daughter's approval rating system." The casual cruelty of it made my jaw tighten, but I held my tongue, fascinated by her ability to frame exclusion as consideration. Crocodile tears emerged on cue, the practiced emotional manipulation I'd watched her perfect since childhood, whenever consequences threatened to interrupt her plans. "I was so scared when you didn't answer. I thought something had happened to you." Selective memory had apparently erased the morning's messages, the calculated insults wrapped in pink hearts and emoji kisses. She stood in my foyer playing the role of concerned daughter, while conveniently forgetting that her worry stemmed from losing access to my bank account rather than genuine care for my well-being. "It was just one wedding, Dad. Just one day where I wanted everything perfect for Silas and me. Just one wedding. Just one public humiliation of the woman I'd married. Just one more confirmation that my children viewed my happiness as secondary to their social convenience." I gestured toward the living room, my voice calm despite the storm building behind my eyes. "We need to talk properly, Stella. Have a seat." Hope flickered across her tear-streaked face as she mistook my invitation for capitulation, following me toward the family discussion space where we'd negotiate the new terms of our relationship. I settled into my usual chair, the leather recliner where I'd read bedtime stories 30 years ago, where I'd helped with homework and dispensed allowances and listened to teenage heartbreaks. Today it served as my judicial bench, with bank statements arranged on the side table like evidence in a trial. Stella refused to sit, her nervous energy manifesting in restless pacing that betrayed the desperation she was working so hard to disguise. The contrast struck me as perfect, my stillness versus her frantic motion, my preparation versus her improvisation. "I understood your message perfectly, Stella," I began, my voice carrying the calm finality of a man who'd spent 4 hours preparing for this moment. "Dad, you have to let me explain. This isn't about misunderstanding. It's about respect." I reached for the bank statements, letting the papers rustle in the silence that followed. Respect for the woman I married, respect for the sacrifices I've made, respect for the fact that I deserve basic courtesy from my own children. Her eyes fixed on the documents in my hands like a defendant watching a prosecutor arrange evidence. "What are those?" 3 years of financial history. I spread the statements across the table with deliberate precision. $75,000 in transfers to you and Jasper. Car payments, insurance, emergency funds, wedding expenses, mortgage assistance. The number hit her like a physical blow. I watched her face drain of color as she processed the mathematics of her dependence, the stark reality of exactly how much her disrespect had cost me. 75? She sank into the couch opposite me, finally understanding the scope of what she stood to lose. I didn't realize it was that much. Of course you didn't. You never asked what these transfers meant to my retirement, to Faye's security, to our plans for the future. You just took and assumed and demanded more. The tears now seemed genuine rather than strategic, born from panic rather than manipulation. But Dad, the wedding is in 9 days. Everything's already booked. The deposits are paid. That's your problem to solve now. The words came out harder than I'd intended, but 37 years of unconditional financial availability had earned me the right to conditional support. Until you learn to respect my family, including Faye, no more money. She cycled through her usual emotional tactics like a desperate radio operator, searching for a frequency that would reach me. Tears gave way to anger, anger to bargaining, bargaining to threats about grandchildren I might never see. But each approach crashed against the wall of my newfound resolve. You can't be serious about this. Her voice cracked with the hysteria of someone watching their safety net disappear. I'm your daughter. Yes, you are. And you're also a 32-year-old woman who just spent an entire weekend demonstrating that being my daughter means never having to earn respect or express gratitude. The fight drained out of her like air from a punctured tire. She slumped against the couch cushions, finally understanding that her usual manipulations had lost their power over a man who'd discovered self-respect. You're really serious about this, aren't you? Completely serious. Her last desperate gambit emerged as a whisper. I can fix this. I can change. I'll invite Faye. I'll make everything right. I studied her face, searching for genuine remorse beneath the panic-driven promises. We'll see about that, Stella. We'll see if you can learn to value people for more than their bank account balance. The silence stretched between us like a chasm neither of us had crossed before. Stella sat deflated in my living room, her designer clothes wrinkled, her careful makeup reduced to dark smudges beneath eyes that finally showed genuine fear rather than calculated emotion. I'll invite Faye. I'll make her maid of honor. The desperate offers tumbled out in breathless succession, each promise more extravagant than the last. Too little, too late. I leaned back in my chair, watching her mental calculator work frantically to solve an equation with no solution. $25,000 needed in 9 days, with no backup plan and no alternative funding source. Her voice changed, dropping the entitled demand I'd heard for decades and replacing it with something I hadn't heard since she was small. I didn't realize how much you do for us, how much you've always done. Physical surrender accompanied the verbal admission, shoulders slumping, hands falling limp in her lap, the posture of someone who'd finally run out of angles to work and manipulations to deploy. I waited, letting the weight of recognition settle fully before responding. No, you didn't realize, because I never made you realize. I enabled this entitlement by never connecting my generosity to basic human decency. I treated Faye terribly, didn't I? The admission came out barely above a whisper, as if speaking it too loudly might make it more real than she could bear. Yes, you did. And you treated me like a bank account with legs, convenient, reliable, never requiring anything in return except the privilege of funding your dreams. Real tears emerged now, different from the strategic moisture she'd deployed earlier. These carried the salt of genuine remorse rather than the artificial desperation of someone trying to preserve their financial advantages. Faye is part of our family. I understand that now. She looked up at me with something approaching the daughter I remembered from childhood, before entitlement had hardened into her default setting. If I prove I've changed, will you still help with the wedding? I measured my response carefully, balancing justice with the possibility of redemption. We'll see how you treat her going forward. Actions, not promises. Consistency, not crisis-driven reform. She nodded like a student accepting terms from a teacher whose lessons she'd finally learned to value. I'll call Faye tonight. I'll apologize properly. Not because I need your money, but because it's right. For the first time in hours, I felt my resolve soften slightly. Not enough to reverse my decision, but enough to remember why I'd loved this girl before she'd grown into someone I barely recognized. We walked to the front door together, our steps marking the transition from confrontation to possibility. Her car waited in my driveway like evidence of the old relationship. She'd driven here expecting to leave with restored funding and minimal consequences. "This is really happening, isn't it?" she asked as her hand touched the doorknob. "Everything's different now." "Everything's different now," I confirmed. "But different doesn't have to mean broken. It just means you'll have to earn what you used to take for granted." The door closed behind her with quiet finality, marking the end of 32 years of unconditional financial support and the beginning of something that might eventually resemble mutual respect. I stood alone in my foyer, processing the emotional toll and the unexpected satisfaction of a boundary successfully established. For the first time in years, I'd chosen my own dignity over family peace. Faye would be home soon, and I had remarkable news to share. If you like this story, please like this video, subscribe to the channel, and share your impressions of this story in the comments. To listen to the next story, click on the box on the left. Thank you for watching.